Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Ohio University's Online Master of Public Administration webinar. Today, we have a very special guest joining us, and we will be discussing the Crisis and Emergency Management concentration. My name is Kimberly Moy, and I am a program specialist for Ohio University's Online Master's degree. And today we are joined by Mr. John Bourne, who is Ohio University's Executive in Residence for the Vianovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs. Hello, John.
Thanks so much for joining us today, John. Do you mind telling our audience a little bit more about yourself and your background with Ohio University?
Sure. Well, I'm a graduate of Ohio University a long time ago, but since that time, I went on to a law enforcement and public safety career that in January of 19 ended as I took this opportunity as an executive in residence at Ohio University. I spent 32 years in total with both law enforcement and public safety agencies, the last 5 as the director of the Ohio Department of Public Safety. That included not only the Ohio State Highway Patrol, a statewide organization, but the Ohio Homeland Security Division, the Ohio Emergency Management Division, Ohio Medical Division, Ohio Medical Services Division, are among the divisions within the Department of Public Safety. And prior to that, I spent 26 years with the Highway Patrol, the last 3 of which I was the head or the superintendent and carried the rank of colonel of the Highway Patrol. So during that period of time, obviously, I've not only been involved in at what I would call the operational level of crisis and emergency events, but certainly in those last leadership positions, the last 8 to 10 years of my career in leadership positions, policy-making positions, and both emergencies and crisis events.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you have a strong, real working background. As an executive in residence, do online students get to interact with you? Do you teach?
Yeah, I do. In fact, these courses within this concentration will be instructed by me. And the really kind of cool thing about these online courses is that they bring a real-world application to foundational academic principles, and they are interactive. So these are not lecture-based courses. These are courses where the students will be able to test the tools that they are provided in the course. And obviously part of that is interacting with me. You know, crisis and emergency management and leadership is as much of an art as it is a science. And so I obviously like that interaction because it helps me learn as well.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go dive in some deeply here to see a little bit more about these courses.
So we know that crisis and emergency management is very important in today's public administration field. Can you tell me a little bit more about what skills are important to learn if you are in a crisis and emergency manager, or even if you're working in the public administration field?
Sure. You know, today, I think probably more so than any time in recent memory, the number of events that we see daily in the news not only are shocking in the severity of the emergencies or crisis events, the duration of those crisis and emergency events, but it's really readily apparent when you have people in leadership positions or in key positions that are not prepared. And those types of preparatory actions are really skills. Not only do you have to adjust your mindset that a crisis is likely and an emergency is very possible, but you have to rehearse those individual skills and organizational skills to make sure that when a crisis does occur, an emergency does occur, it's much like a reaction to a fire alarm in the building. It's an example I've used before for 50-some years. Probably all of us have grown up from elementary school to your workplace today. When you do fire drills, no one thinks anything of it. Everyone knows what to do. If you hear a fire alarm, you know what to do. But that is one of the few emergency preparations that across the board, private and public sector, I think we're largely well prepared for. And ton of credit goes to the fire industry over the last 40 and 50 years to get us to that place. But when you think about an active shooter, a tornado, a cybersecurity threat, those things that not only can impact people and property, but the integrity of the organization and the entire communities that they serve, for the most part, very few organizations and people have had any formal training, and they really don't put a lot of thought into the worst case. And I think that's one of the, key skills is not only the preparation, but understanding that the worst case doesn't have to happen if you're well prepared. And so that overall kind of theme of being prepared is key. That's only the first part of it. Executing the plan, being resilient and adaptable within the plan, collaborating with stakeholders. Really, every skill in public administration and public administration leadership is tested at a magnified degree during a crisis and an emergency. And all those flaws and all those gaps and all those skills, from communication to preparation to organizational continuity of operations, all of those are readily apparent to both those external stakeholders that are watching and your internal stakeholders as well. So it really is a basis of fundamentals. These courses focus on the fundamentals. And so the concentration in crisis emergency management not only prepares you for the crisis and emergency management function that you may find yourself in unwittingly, but it also prepares that leader and those public administrators and others for the day-to-day operations and being better, more resilient, and more capable of being able to perform their functions.
Wow. I think one thing that you just said that stood out to me is like, it is the fires, it is the earthquakes and the natural disasters, but it's also things that are also unseen. Like you said, cybersecurity attacks. Like it's everywhere now. It can come from anywhere. So as you mentioned, planning is key, but also being able to rehearse these plans. I think it's crazy. It's something you don't think about as an everyday citizen.
That's right. And I think for most people, they don't either believe it's going to occur, they don't think about it occurring, or they're thinking, if something like that occurs, I'll react. Well, in the most critical times in an organization of your life, allowing yourself to rest on just what you hope you'll do in one of those situations rather than what you know you will do. You know, one of the questions I ask early on in these courses is, if something bad happens, an emergency happens, a crisis happens, and you have to think outside the bounds of just the active shooter, the hostage incident, the employee that is tainting the product within your organization, or the bad employee, the cybersecurity attack, all those possible bad things. If that occurs, do you want to essentially bet your entire career on being able to react correctly? And instead, we prepare and we train for things that happen on a daily basis that aren't organizational or career ending. And so crisis and emergency management, to me, is one of the most fundamental skills, as well as academic principle backgrounds. And that's really kind of what makes these courses unique, this overall master's program unique. There's lots of places out there, including federal certifications that are excellent programs to become federally certified in hazmat response or emergency response. There's lots of really good academic programs that underlay the principles and the theories and case studies of crisis and emergency events. The unique thing about this concentration is that it blends real-world applications of crisis events and lessons learned with not only the academic credentials and credibility of Ohio University, but those basic fundamental principles of public administration.
Awesome. Thank you. So on this slide here, we have a chart from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And this is the Emergency Management Director career path, and it is expected to grow 5% by 2028. And that to me is not surprising given the fact that, crisis happens quite frequently on the news. You see it all the time. So from your perspective, John, what types of careers, aside from Emergency Management Director, who else can benefit from taking these courses?
I think it really falls into a few different categories. First being the practitioners, and that would be your emergency management directors at the city, county, state, federal level, emergency management directors even at the private sector level that want to better understand the public administration side, or maybe want to move into public administration, public safety directors, law enforcement, executives, fire, homeland security. Those all fall into what I would call the practitioner, the public safety practitioners. But in addition to that, I think another key category are those people that are in public administration or moving into public administration and need a fundamental understanding of the decisions that have to be made, the decision points that have to be made, the preparations. It's really difficult, I think, sometimes to be effective as a leader if you don't understand what the practitioners, particularly the key practitioners in an emergency or crisis management, are taking into account. And so having a good understanding doesn't necessarily mean if you're going to be, for example, a mayor or an executive of a county or a public administration leader within an organization, that even is at the village level that you need to know all the aspects of crisis and emergency management, but you need those basic fundamental skills of preparation, collaboration, and obviously then crisis leadership, because people are going to look to you. And I think at least the third category of people that this career path or preparation for a career path could impact are those people in an organization that may not necessarily expect that they're going to be in a position of making decisions or operating. But I'll give you one example. So when the Ebola crisis happened in the world a few years ago, Ohio became, unfortunately, one of the first states in the United States to actually have someone that was exposed to the Ebola virus who had been on another continent, and that person ended up being a nurse. And so Ohio all of a sudden found itself at the heart of a national and worldwide crisis when it came to the Ebola, I want to say the Ebola scare, but certainly the Ebola crisis. And it required us as an organization with almost 4,000 employees to start taking a look at internally, okay, if a third of our workforce or half of our workforce, we're a 24/7, 365 workforce, if a third or a fourth or half or whatever the number is not able to come to work because of a quarantine or because they're ill, regardless if it's Ebola or something else, those types of crisis emergency management decisions are now coming down to people that never felt like they would ever be in that position of leadership. So that third bucket is kind of what I would call a category catch-all. All those people that may not be practitioners, may not feel like they're in necessarily a leadership position, but will find themselves in key decision-making positions when a crisis or emergency occurs. And so this, I think, prepares not only the practitioner, the public administrator, current or future, but basically anyone in a public service role or may find themselves in a public service role to be better equipped to prepare for a crisis and an emergency.
Wow, that is a crazy example, but I can totally see it now. I bet you come across some people who are probably like, well, I don't really need a master's degree to do that. I feel like the master's, it's less about the master's and what more you'll learn. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it does two things. One, it will change your perspective, and it will change your perspective in a way that will broaden your horizons. And that's what obviously higher education does to begin with, not only providing you real-world skills, but it's also changing your perspective. And so I think the master's degree obviously carries with it, I call academic credibility. So it's important to have these skills, but to be able to move through careers with career credibility, having credentials, and a master's degree is certainly one of those credentials that carries credibility automatically with it, beyond obviously the specific curriculum you may be studying. People that know that you've completed a master's degree or working on a master's degree, you have certain traits that obviously an organization is going to look favorably upon.
Awesome. So why should you choose Ohio's Online Master of Public Administration? Well, our online program began in 2017, so it's a very current program. We do offer 4 concentrations. Obviously, you all know about the Crisis and Emergency Management concentration, but we also have state and local government management, nonprofit management, and public leadership and management. You do not need to decide right away which concentration you need to go to, but know that those are available. To be qualified for admission, so you don't need to take a GRE or GMAT, all of our coursework is completable 100% online, which is great because that means you don't have to travel, you don't have to log in at a certain time. Our classes are taught in 7-week increments, 1 course at a time. And I am a working professional. I don't know about you, but I could not do my current master's program if I had to focus on more than 1 course. So these 7-week courses are super flexible, and it's all designed if you are a working professional. John alluded to this earlier, that Ohio University is not only just, a place for you, but it has a great name and a great reputation. Ohio University's Vianovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs just earned the number 12 spot in SR Education Group's Best Online Colleges Offering MPA Programs. So you know that the degree that you have here has a great name and great reputation. And just a quick note, if you're worried about what your degree will say, it does not mention that it is online. It is just a Master's of Public Administration. So here you see our core curriculum. This is the curriculum that with whatever concentration you decide, you will be taking all of these courses to give everybody a nice foundation of the public administration. So you'll see here Foundations of Public Administration, Research Methods in Leadership and Public Affairs, Organizational Leadership, Public Sector Program Evaluation, Public Budgeting, Policy Analysis for Public Affairs and Leadership, Public-Private Partnerships, Measuring Outcomes in Public and Nonprofit Organizations, and Strategic Leadership and Public Value. And again, all of these courses just kind of keep on building on your skill set, giving you that leadership and mindset that you'll need to be successful in your public administration career. So you just heard about our core curriculum. Now we're going to move into the concentration curriculum. These are the courses that, if you choose the Crisis and Emergency Management concentration, that you will be taking. And fortunately, John was on the team to help develop it for us, so I'm just going to have you describe the courses. And I think we start with Crisis and Emergency Planning, if I'm not mistaken.
We do. And Crisis and Emergency Planning is the first course, and it's what I would call a foundational course. All of 3 of these are not only fundamentally structured, in other words, we focus on the fundamentals of crisis and emergency planning, but we start with, again, the foundation of anything is the most important aspect of it. Crisis and emergency planning is absolutely key, and is probably one of the least practiced skills within the public sector. Private sector, a little bit better, but even with that, many people believe that developing a crisis plan or emergency plan, one plan catches all. So for example, one of the things you learn in the course is how to assess the organizational risk. You certainly don't want to be preparing for a volcano eruption if you live in Ohio. But that's not a crisis that's likely going to occur. It's kind of a silly example, but many of the crisis plans that are out there are one size fits all. And so we talk about how do you assess the risk of an organization? What are the continuity of operations or continuity of business operations that are really, really important for the organization, and then obviously the resiliency within an organization when a crisis does occur, an emergency does occur. And so you essentially step by step move through this process and build this crisis plan. And when you're complete with this course, the Crisis and Emergency Planning, you'll actually walk out of the course with a crisis plan as well as a system to ensure that crisis plan is adaptable and ready to use for your organization or an organization you want to work for. The second course that we teach is crisis collaboration, and essentially public and private sector, and we know a lot about the importance of public-private partnerships, but in a crisis, those aren't just things that are good to have. Those are absolutely survival relationships that have to be in place. They have to be in place before the crisis. They have to be in place to ensure that trust is there both during the crisis and after the crisis. And certainly, crisis collaboration isn't just during the crisis or emergency itself. It's also afterwards, because is when the work begins after a crisis of ensuring the integrity of the organization, stakeholders' involvement and stake in the organization. And then lastly is the crisis leadership, which kind of brings it all together in a fundamental way. And this is really not just aimed at leaders within public administration or within public sector organizations, but those people that are going to be making decisions in crisis situations. And what I have found over 32 years of both public safety and law enforcement and interacting with our private sector partners and other public sector partners, it's many times the person in the middle, the person that's in an organizational seat that didn't realize that they would be making decisions of which organizational survival or people's lives could be at stake as a result of things that they're doing or not doing. So we focus on the fundamentals. Those three courses, crisis and emergency planning, crisis collaboration, and crisis leadership, are those basic fundamental building blocks that we look at.
Wow, that seems like a very comprehensive set of courses for people who both are, the tactical, the fires, the police, the people out there, but then also for the public administration professional or future professional to get the academic skills. What would you say to someone who's like, well, it doesn't seem like I get a lot of practical training? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, when you walk away from either one or all three of these courses, each one of these essentially provides you something that not only is a portfolio builder for your career, but a real-world application within a crisis. And I think probably the number one thing that I can do in this presentation is just ask the question, what's the difference between a crisis, an emergency, and a disaster? And it's been my experience that many organizations fail to recognize a crisis or emergency when they're confronted with one, even those that are well prepared. And part of that, especially if you're a practitioner, if you're on the emergency or public safety practitioner side, you deal with these all the time. And an example I use is a riot at an institution in Southern Ohio in 1993, a long time ago, at the Lucasville Prison, Southern Ohio Correction Facility. A fight in a yard became one of the longest riots in duration in U.S. history and one of the deadliest riots in U.S. history. No one knew the day that event began that was going to end up as a prolonged crisis event. And so even those that are in the field, I think when you walk away, it gives you a different perspective, both, again, from the practical, real-world tools that you're provided, but also with the fundamental academic principles that support those tools.
That's awesome. And it sounds like prior to any academic training, it was really like trial by fire. Complete or survive an event, really, and then see what kind of takeaways are. So would you say that this program kind of fills that gap so people don't have to just kind of figure it out on their own?
It does, and I think that's probably one key takeaway. The people that complete these courses, and again, I'm saying this based on my experience, both with people that I worked with on a daily basis and people that I met and worked with during crisis events, in many cases, the crisis event and the learning that goes on is the only learning that they've ever, or effort that they've really undertaken to try to prepare for a crisis. And you don't want to prepare for a crisis or emergency during a crisis or emergency. Good example of that is you don't want to exchange business card and build relationships during a crisis or emergency. You want to do that prior to it. That's where the crisis collaboration comes in. So, yeah, the best thing that you can do, not only for your organization, but your career, and really the people that you care about most, is make sure you're prepared for a crisis and emergency, and really that's what these 3 fundamental courses do.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before I jump into our admissions requirements and any loose ends that we have, I wanted to take a moment to thank you. Do you have anything else for our potential students, or?
No, I think it's going to be really exciting. And for me, you know, I think if this course is effective, I'm going to learn as much as I provide. Crisis and emergency management, there's science behind it. There's certainly a science behind it, but the art of execution is something that I think you learn each time. And so the really, really kind of cool thing about this course is that it's not a stagnant course, or these 3 courses are not stagnant courses. As obviously crisis and emergency events change in the United States and the world, these courses will change and adapt with them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
So you might be wondering what you need to be accepted into Ohio University's online Master of Public Administration. The admissions process is pretty simple. You just need to have your bachelor's degree transcripts from an accredited institution. Again, we will need those as official transcripts. We'll need a letter of intent or a personal statement, a current resume, as well as 3 letters of recommendation. Our enrollment advisors are super great about letting you know any tips and tricks that we have about what our admissions committee is looking for. So get in touch with them. Our contact information will be on the next slide. And just some quick notes here. We have 3 starts per year: spring, fall, and summer. This concentration in crisis and emergency management is offered all 3 of those starts. So anytime you'd like to start, we're ready for you. And also on the screen is our contact information. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can reach out to us at our email address or give us a call. Thank you so much for listening and attending this afternoon. We look forward to hearing from you soon.